2026 is almost here, and the new year promises to bring skyrocketing healthcare premiums unless lawmakers in Washington can reach a compromise. We're talking with reporters who cover Congress and the federal health insurance programs.
But right now, there's not been any indication from Speaker Johnson that he is going to be advocating for any of the compromise legislation that's being discussed in the House.
Our guests today are Robert King, who reports on Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act for Politico, and Sandhya Raman, a healthcare reporter for CQ Roll Call.
I think affordability and, the forms of that will be a big thing, whether or not we get any sort of deal on ACA or some of the other things that have been in the mix. I mean, Congress has been very interested in PBM reform and things like that to bring down health costs. So I think going into next year, regardless of what happens in the next couple of weeks, that'll be definitely something big to watch here.
This is Conversations on Healthcare.
Well, Sandhya, welcome back to Conversations on Healthcare. And Robert, thanks for joining us for the first time.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, here we go again. The Obamacare subsidies are set to expire at the end of the year, and Congress is really facing another budget deadline of January 30th. I wonder if we could ask both of you to assess where things stand and what the chances are for a compromise.
Sure. I feel like right now we have a lot of different moving pieces, but not a real sense that any of these things are going to make it across the finish line. We're gearing up towards 2 votes in the Senate, one from each party on Thursday on their plan for how to deal with this crisis. It looks like both of them are going to just be party line votes, not move forward. And in the House, we're kind of waiting to see what House Republicans are going to share with us that they're trying to do. But I think the main thing is that there are a lot of different plans bubbling up, but none of them have enough support to really make it into law.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I think right now there's not a lot of consensus on the Senate side. It seems like Republicans and Democrats are barreling towards a side-by-side vote that was agreed to by Senate Majority leaders soon as part of a deal to reopen the government, I think last month. And so, but there wasn't a guarantee that a subsidy extension would pass. So right now, what I think is kind of interesting is that there's more compromise on the House side. I think there have been some Democrats and Republicans, primarily more vulnerable Republicans, those in tough races next year, are getting together and formulating proposals like an extension of the enhanced subsidies, but with some reforms. But right now, there's not been any indication from Speaker Johnson that he is going to be advocating for any of the compromise legislation that's being discussed in the House.
And the White House has provided no guidance at all. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there was President Trump did float a 2-year extension, an extension with an income cap among some other changes. But that was quickly scuttled after opposition from a lot of rank and file Republicans. And right now we haven't seen really any endorsement from President Trump. He did interview with Politico's Dasha Burns, an interview that released today, shameless plug, you can catch it on our homepage, where she asked him about this issue, and he basically reiterated the push for a direct payment, that he wants the subsidy to be instead a direct payment to Americans rather than what he calls a bailout to insurance companies. So nothing new right there in that interview.
Well, it seems like wait and see and maybe compromise are the 3 operative words of the day, with maybe on the compromise. But thank you for that. And this question maybe picks up on that. Sandhya, we have been hearing that some Republicans want to avoid sending the subsidy funding to the insurance companies, but their alternative is to put it in individuals' health savings accounts. So what's the status of that idea at this point?
So I guess as of just, maybe less than an hour now, we had Senate Majority Leader John Thune kind of tee up that what the Republicans are going to vote on this week is a proposal from Senators Bill Cassidy and Mike Crapo that is kind of similar-ish to one of the things that Trump has talked about, putting money in those accounts. And so that legislation was, formally unveiled yesterday. You would get, if you were eligible for this, between $1,000 and $1,500 per person on the plan per unit, with some different reforms attached to that. The issue, I think, is that, we haven't really seen, there are no Democrats that have said that this is something that they want. Even among some of the Republicans that you talk to, it might not be their ideal plan, but they're planning to vote for it. So that's what we're kind of watching there.
Robert, you talked earlier about the president with his HSA idea, the one he'll support, but the practical reality of setting that up seems like something that will take quite a time to implement, right? I mean, that's not easy to do, and all the negotiations around that seem like that's almost dead on arrival.
Well, it's interesting. I've talked to several state-run insurance exchanges, and it's important to note that open enrollment for the ACA 2026 coverage year has started. It started for most states on November 1st. And a lot of the state-run exchanges have told me that they can get a clean extension of the subsidies implemented within about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. They plan most states have kind of allowed insurers to offer two sets of rates, one with the subsidies and one without. They obviously approve the rates without the subsidies, but they have the rates, that with this enhanced subsidies and calculated in the hopper if they need to go. They've told me that anything like an HSA would take longer, and because it's just more complicated. And also, it's important to note that under Cassidy and Crapo's plan to get an HSA, an ACA customer would have to buy a bronze tier plan, which is different from a silver or gold tier option. A bronze tier plan has much lower premiums, but they have higher deductibles. And they also have higher copays than the other options.
Makes it very difficult for consumers to actually use the health insurance that they have, although I guess the preventive measures would still be upfront covered. But Sandhya, you've reported that a bipartisan group of House lawmakers also is talking about extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 2 more years. Does this have any legs? Do you think that's going to garner support?
So we have a few different bipartisan groups trying to do this now. I think one of the earlier ones was a group of 4 that was doing a 2-year with some of these different guardrails, capping how much income you could have to be eligible, minimum premiums, things like that. But since that original one, we've had 2 more. We had one at the end of last week with about 30 some members from both parties in the House that, there's like some minor details in between each of them. And I think the problem that we've had is each time we've not gotten a strong sense from House leadership that they would take this up. And then I think interestingly, we have another one today that came out with from Representatives Fitzpatrick, Suozzi, and others, which is a little bit of a kind of in the sweet spot in that it kind of combines the 2-year extension with parts of the HSA proposal. And so I think that'll be interesting, just what the reaction is to that as the House comes in this evening, just because it is a little bit in the middle, and a lot of the other ones have been a little bit more firmly in one camp or the other. But no kind of strong sense that we would even get a vote on any of these, even if there's support or not.
Mark, I can't help but think back to when the ACA first came into being, and these kinds of questions were being debated in town halls and high school auditoriums and reported on daily, but we really don't have any kind of major public ongoing communication in a very palpable way, I think, out in the communities.
No, that's absolutely right. Sandhya, the other part of this really tricky situation involves abortion. And Republicans want stricter abortion limitations in order to extend Obamacare funds. That seems like a non-starter for Democrats, is it?
It is. I think that it has come up a little bit more and more as we've, get in these conversations. If you talk to some of the, at least from the Senate side, some of the Senate Democrats that have been part of the bipartisan negotiations with certain Republicans on, can we come together? Can we find some sort of compromise? That's the thing that they've been saying over the last couple of weeks, that, this keeps being a non-starter, that they absolutely want language that would prevent, if you have a plan that would cover abortion, from being eligible for the tax credit. And that complicates things, given that there are several states where all coverage, private coverage, is going to have that in some ways part of their plan. So I think we've seen a lot of more lobbying on that in the last couple of weeks too, from, abortion rights groups, anti-abortion groups, all just kind of, saying that if you don't go one way or the other, that's a non-starter. And I think that's been making it a little bit more complicated and sort of finding a middle ground.
Well, we've been talking about deal making, and Robert, we all like Washington to reach deals when that's possible, seems to move things forward. But you've also reported that some in the conservative movement believe that the Obamacare fears are overblown. And I'm curious what groups like the Paragon Institute are saying about this.
Sure. So Paragon Institute has been a think tank that has gotten a lot of influence over the past couple of years, especially when it comes to conservative health policy. They trumpeted some of the changes that you saw in the One Big Beautiful Bill, including provider taxes and state-directed payments. And they have noted that they believe that the ACA enhanced subsidies, which has increased the amount of $0 premium plans, has increased ACA fraud on the exchanges because there's more more of these $0 plans where people may not know that they've signed up for a plan, may not know that they're even on Obamacare, and brokers would do this so that they could get a commission. But I've talked with some other experts and backers of the ACA that note that while this has been a problem on the exchanges, and CMS in the past couple of years, and CMS has taken action to address it, it hasn't been as much of a problem with the states. And the reason is that the states have state-run exchanges, of which there's 20, and the District of Columbia. The states have a more like a stricter sign-up protocol.
Mm-hmm.
They require consumers to call in to the marketplace to confirm, or require more documentation in order for a broker to get their commission. So, there's some critics that are pushing back on that assertion, but it has taken root among a lot of Republicans, this idea about that the enhanced subsidies have increased fraud on the exchanges, and that is one of the reasons why they should be expired, or they should let them expire, I should say.
Wildly popular. As far as I can tell, they're pretty wildly popular with consumers.
I think we know polls are opinions, and election day is judgment. But Robert, I'm wondering, the flip of this is that polling shows Democrats, at least now, winning on the healthcare issues after the government shutdown. Wondering if you can give us an overview of where the broader public opinion sits right now.
Sure. So there's been, I think, some polling, I believe, from KFF, mm-hmm. Which is a nonpartisan health policy research that shows that a majority of both Democrats and I believe also Republicans have been in favor of extending the subsidies. It's been harder, I think, for conservatives to manage and get that message across that these subsidies are a net negative for consumers. And it's been an issue that has plagued conservatives for a while when it comes to healthcare policy, including whether or not they wanted to make cuts to the Medicaid expansion during Obamacare repeal in 2017. It's kind of a question of whether or not conservatives, how much will this hurt conservatives? remains to be seen. I think that it's important to note that what I said earlier, that ACA open enrollment has started, and there's been a lot of auto enrollment that is still occurring. But some experts say we need to wait and see until January, when people will see their first premium payment and be like, wow, I don't want to pay this. And then that's when you might start to see some shifts. But states have already been telling me that they are not seeing as much newer enrollees. These are people that are not on the exchanges and would not auto renew. They are seeing fewer new signups this year compared to prior open enrollments.
But not fewer people, right? It's just that it hasn't grown. Is that what it? Or they're less?
There's a certain portion that will auto renew every year, and then there's they also have a certain portion that will come in and want to get coverage for one reason or another. Either they, have changed jobs, or they've, recently decided or recently been able to gain access to, gain access to subsidies or something like that. But what I believe I talked with one state that said that they are seeing fewer of these new signups so far this year.
Which may translate to more uninsured people.
That's right.
Period. Yeah. Well, I'm going to turn away from the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare for just a minute. Sandhya, we'd love for you to tell us about your reporting on the new number 2 person at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He's an outspoken critic of mass vaccination. That obviously is troubling to many. But what are you hearing and reporting on?
I think the timing of them kind of rolling out this number 2 at CDC is interesting. So the former Louisiana Surgeon General, Ralph Abraham, is, now the number 2 at CDC. They announced this shortly before they had the ACIP meetings to, discuss all sorts of vaccination things just last week. And I think given his past comments, as, he's a former member of Congress, but he's also in his role as Louisiana Surgeon General. He's amplified a lot of vaccine skepticism. He's opposed, mass vaccination for the flu, and also been a pretty strong proponent of ivermectin as a COVID treatment, which has, been debunked. And so I think that as we see a little bit as what he's going to be doing, that'll be interesting. He's also criticized Bill Cassidy, who held the Health Committee, and that sort of, aligns a little bit with the back and forth that there's been between Health Secretary RFK Jr. and Cassidy. So I'm kind of curious, what we'll see from him, especially since.
So it's not a Senate confirmed position, then, I assume?
Yeah.
For making those attacks?
We don't have a CDC director at present after Susan Menares was fired earlier this year. And so I guess in the wait for someone to be nominated by Trump, for that to kind of go through that process, there's less control from Congress and just, less oversight in terms of what's going to be done then. But it seems like it's going to be more on this MAHA agenda. Abraham has spoken pretty frankly about being a proponent of MAHA. And so I think those are the kind of things that I'll be kind of eyeing and just seeing at CDC in terms of how they're going to address communicable diseases, but especially on vaccines.
And very interesting, I think we're seeing states taking things much more into their own control with their departments of health around their recommendations, what they'll pay for, what they'll provide to communities. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this shakes out.
Senator Cassidy, have any buyer's remorse in terms of the secretary's position, or is he just being held down by his conservative base?
I think he's a little cryptic in kind of how he responds when he's asked on some of these things. I mean, he will go after specific comments, like after ACIP last week. He said, he was disappointed in some of the things related to hepatitis, especially given his background, working on that issue for many years as a physician. But I think he's kind of stopped short of just saying anything too strong. I mean, he's still also up for re-election coming up. And I think it's a tough position to be in when some of the things that you might be looking for are not kind of playing
Is he
out.
facing a primary or not? I forget.
There have been people that have expressed interest in primarying him.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert, another big change in 2026 is the adjustments to the Medicare physician fee schedule. Basically, highly paid physicians are getting a bit of a cut in their reimbursement rate, and primary care doctors are getting a boost. But to the rescue, the AMA is really fighting back. Tell us about their initiative and how successful it might be.
Sure. So this is an issue surrounding the physician fee schedule, which sets the physician payment rates for Medicare for the coming year. And this is the first one that has occurred under the new administration, and it makes some interesting changes to kind of how the payment rates for certain types of physicians are calculated. For a while, and still going, the American Medical Association has a committee of doctors, and that includes several different specialists that offer kind of these payment rates. And there's been concerns among physicians that the payment rates for primary care has lagged behind that. Changes to that has lagged behind other more higher paying specialties, and it is filtered down to whether this will limit primary care as a desirable type of field to go into, especially since it's very expensive to go into medical school, and a lot of doctors will go into one of these specialties because they have student loans to pay off. So the CMS really tried to make a change to this where it bumps payments for family medicine and general practices by about 3%. And at the same time, it lowers the payments for some specialties. Like, for instance, neurosurgeons will have a 5% pay cut, but in some respects, specialty could get a higher pay increase, like an allergist will take home an extra 7%. So this is part of this action done by Dr. Oz, who is actually a doctor, is part of a larger examination, I would say, that the RFK's HHS wants to take on the AMA. They are concerned that the AMA has too much power when it comes to setting rates and policy for Medicare. For instance, there's been concerns about the diagnosis codes, which is the code that a doctor will submit to Medicare to essentially get reimbursed for a service. These codes have been created by the AMA as well. So there's concerns whether or not the codes have been properly developed over time. And that's, I think, another fight that we should look for on the horizon surrounding this, because this is a issue that RFK in particular has championed, in addition to many, many others.
Margaret, Robert just mentioned student loans, and I think the whole profession, the whole healthcare industry was taken by surprise when nurses were sort of relegated to a much lower level in terms of healthcare coverage, in terms of student loans. I'm wondering, where did this sort of arise from? I think the nursing world's certainly very concerned about the change that happened. Any sense of what was the motivating force to make those changes?
I believe that was, I think, something that the Department of Education had created, and it's part of a larger reform effort that they're that they're looking to do over there. They're looking to, it's creating what is the definition of a professional degree, and they wanted to reclassify graduate nurses as graduate instead of professional, which could limit the student loan amounts that nursing students could get. Nursing organizations have really been pushing hard against this. They think that it is a harmful policy for the profession. So we'll see where this goes.
We'll have to do another show on that some time because it has potential very adverse impact on the pipeline, certainly in terms of primary care as well as acute care settings. But I wonder if I could just get us to focus for a moment on the fact it's also open enrollment season for the Medicare Advantage plans. And generally, I think almost since Medicare Advantage plans were created, the Republicans were big supporters. But there's started to be some cracks in that facade. Tell us where you think things stand in terms of continued support for the Medicare Advantage plans.
Sure. So I think that Republicans still love MA. I think that Democrats, more centrist Democrats, I think progressives are not fans of MA, but I think that Republicans still love Medicare Advantage, but there is a growing chorus of concerns surrounding the program. Republicans are concerned about the high amount of prior authorization care denials, which require a doctor to get insurer approval before delivering a prescription or delivering care. It's become a source of frustration for doctors, and Republicans have generally seen and heard that frustration. There's also concerns about spending. Republicans have wanted Medicare Advantage spending to be in line with traditional Medicare, and that's just not the case. And they've been very critical of that. There's been a bipartisan bill called the No Upcode Act, which is co-sponsored by Jeff Merkley and Bill Cassidy, that would clamp down on some of these issues that they say are driving higher spending in the Medicare Advantage program. So I think that Republicans are still very in favor of Medicare Advantage, but there are definitely targeted reforms that they want to make to the program.
I know we only have a few minutes left, but let's ask each of you what you think the big healthcare story of 2026 will be.
I think to put it all under one umbrella, I think affordability and, the forms of that will be a big thing, whether or not we get any sort of deal on ACA or some of the other things that have been in the mix. I mean, Congress has been very interested in PBM reform and things like that to bring down health costs. So I think going into next year, regardless of what happens in the next couple of weeks, that'll be definitely something big to watch here. And I would just also add in, after we got the One Big Beautiful Bill passed into law this year, a lot of those things start getting implemented next year. So just in terms of how those play out, or if there are things teed up for 2027, just how states are figuring out that they will implement those things. So I think those will both be very big.
Yeah, definitely. And two things that I'm really looking for are the implementation of the Rural Health Transformation Program. Right. It's a $50 billion fund passed with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which I'm trying to make as OB3 as the acronym to be used. I don't know if it'll work. But that money, CMS is going to decide which states get a slice of that money literally in a couple weeks. And there's already Politico. We had a story about how some states are chafing that they have to adopt certain MAHA policies in order to qualify for that funding. So where that money goes and how it's spent is something I'm really taking a look at. As a CMS reporter, I'm also looking into, some of the more changes that Dr. Oz has been making or wants to make to physician pay and to value-based care, especially several new models that they are rolling out and they're implementing. I think the other thing I'm really looking into is how states implement the work requirements program for the under OB3, which goes into effect in 2027. So states have about a year to set up this whole program and ensure that people don't get inadvertently lose coverage, which was a concern that some states had with work requirements, is that some people will drop off coverage even if they meet the requirements. So those are kind of three things that I'm keeping an eye on. And of course, we have the midterms and also, MAHA within HHS, what could be the next change that we could see for the agencies.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye on both of you and on your reporting. And we want to thank you, Sandhya and Robert, for joining us. And thank you to our audience for being here. Remember, subscribe to our videos on YouTube, find us on Facebook and X, and please share your thoughts and comments about this program. Take care and be well. This copyrighted program is produced by Conversations on Healthcare and cannot be reproduced or retransmitted in whole or in part without the express written consent from Community Health Center, Inc. The views expressed by guests are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect the opinion of Conversations on Healthcare or its affiliated entities.